52 countries have applied to become funding members of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. That number is much higher than many expected. This week, former Australian Foreign Minister Bob Carr shares his insights on the reason for the bank's initial success, as well as the challenges ahead.
Australia is quite late in making up the decision to be a founding member of the AIIB. So do you know the reason for that?
I think it would have been better if Australia had been in it at the very start. We want China to have a lead role in infrastructure in Asia. We want China to be part of a multilateral organisation. We also want the bank to aspire to the very highest standards of accountability. I'd like the bank to have the same environmental standards as the other world institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, for example.
So I believe the infrastructure and construction will be highly boosted after the establishment of AIIB. But it comes to the question of the environmental pollution, because we know IMF has its own environmental standards, and United States has been criticizing the bank, the AIIB, lack of an up-to-par standard in environmental protections.
Yeah, one of America's criticisms of the bank is that it lacks the commitment to high environmental standards that you've got from the World Bank or from the IMF. And I think there's an answer here. I think China should say very quickly, we will have, that's fine, but we want the new bank to subscribe to the same environmental standards. That is, any development will protect the interests of endangered species. We will not fund the logging of old growth forest. We'll protect the heritage. We'll make a contribution. We'll use renewable energy. All those standards, just adopt them, because there is no part of the world that is suffering a more drastic loss of environmental quality than Asia. Rainforests are vanishing, species are becoming endangered. The cities are choked with pollution. There's been a lot of attention to Chinese cities, but Indian cities suffer even higher levels of air pollution. And the bank needs to fund, among other things, it needs to fund a shift to sustainable levels of life and production. China should just say, we're going to see that that is written into the earliest work of the bank. We won't be behind the World Bank when it comes to protection of the environment. We'll be up there, entirely aligned with its standards. China said pretty quickly, the President of China said very quickly, this new bank, which has received encouraging support, this new bank will adopt the identical environment protection standards of the World Bank. I think that would be a very positive message. And it would just confirm how brilliant China has been at using soft power diplomacy.
The people around the world, they believe that Australia is a strong ally of the United States in the Asia-Pacific region. So
I think there's a better way of looking at this. I think the fact that Australia is a strong ally of the United States and still decided to join the bank, despite strong arguments from the American president, I think it's very important that China does have a diplomatic success like this. To have Britain and Australia and South Korea, other countries that are friends of the United States and allies of the United States, join the bank despite America telling them not to, I think is a very positive outcome. Certainly a positive outcome for China.
So what are the potential benefits do you see is there for Australia?
I think in helping provide another route for Asian countries to lift their living standards. Australia is a supplier of raw materials, a supplier of education services, other services to the region, can only benefit if more countries in Southeast Asia end up with living standards like those of Singapore. And that's what the bank is all about. Upgrading infrastructure is a means to pulling people into first world or developed world living standards.
You just came back from the Boao Forum, and on that forum, two of the major issues being discussed were first the One Belt and One Road scheme that was proposed by China, and the other one is the AIIB. What can you share with us?
3 senior economists said to me, very credible economists, that they were confident that China would achieve annual economic growth of around 7%, even more, each year between now and 2020. Now that is very good news. It's not only good for China and the goals of the Chinese leadership, it's very good news for other countries in the region trading with China. There's also some discussion of economic growth at the so-called new normal. If the Chinese economy is growing by 7% per annum, it's adding more to economic activity each year than 5 years ago when it was growing by over 11%. The point is that China, every 2 years, is adding economic activity equal to the size of the South Korean economy. That's at the new normal. So China's still making more of a contribution to world economic growth than any other country.
Do you think that a powerful China is a threat?
It can only be a good thing that the economies of the region enjoy more integration. And to have China talking this positive language, I think, conveys an image of China in no sense threatening, but a positive and optimistic message about China.